Hi, this is Ali Arango of Little Guy CGI, and today I would like to show you how to make a low poly car in Blender 2.78C. So let's get started. Okay, if this is your first time in Blender, I recommend you go to File, User Preferences, go to Input, and then choose Select with left click. Blender's default select is with right click, and this may confuse you if you're coming from Adobe programs or other 3D programs. Okay, while you're in here, click on Add-ons, put a check mark next to 3D View: 3D Navigation, then scroll down. Put a check mark next to Mesh: F2, Mesh: Inset Polygon, Mesh: Loop Tools, as well as Mesh: Relax, and then scroll down more. Then put a check mark next to Pi: 3D Viewport Pi Menus, as well as Pi Menu: UI Pi Menu Official. Okay, in Blender, to manipulate your view, if you hold the middle mouse button, you can rotate the view. If you hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button, you can pan the view. If you want to quickly manipulate your view, you can click over to the left. You can click on Navigation. You can click these buttons right here. And by clicking through these buttons, they'll quickly allow you to rotate your view around the object that you're working on. Okay, if you're not sure about which view you're in, if you look right here, you can see which view you're in. See how this says View Perspective? Perspective is your basic 3D view. If you click here where this says View Perspective / Ortho, when I say here, I'm still in the Navigation tab, you'll go into an orthographic view. So if I click Front, you can see this says Front Orthographic View. And an orthographic view is very similar to having a blueprint view. A lot of times it makes it easier to work inside of 3D. Here in Blender, what we want to do now is we want to bring in a reference image. So what we're going to do is we're going to press N to bring up our properties panel. This is our properties panel right here. We're going to scroll down, and then we're going to look for where we see Blender say background images, which is right here. If you don't see this, you might have to drag this out a little bit further, or you might have to, in Blender you can expand panels by most of the time putting your cursor near the end of a panel, and you'll see these two arrows, and that'll allow you to expand your view. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a check mark here for background images. I'm then going to click this black arrow here, which expands our view. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to click where this says Add Image. We're going to click here. Once we do this, we see this open up. I'm going to take this slider and scroll down a little. I'm going to go to where I see Open. I'm going to click here. I'm going to go to where around where my image is at. My image is currently on the desktop. When I click Desktop, I can see all of these files, but I can't actually see pictures. However, it's useful to be able to see picture we're actually working on. So I'm going to click, it looks like 4 squares to me. I'm going to left click right here. I want this image right here. So I'm going to left click there, then click Open Image. And now we can see this reference image here in the background. Okay, my goal for this tutorial is to make a low poly car that looks good for being low poly. The way that I plan to do that is we're using this image for a reference image. However, we're also going to use this image for the textures on it to make our low poly car look more detailed than it actually is. Okay, in Blender, when you come into Blender, typically when you come in, you are in object mode. If you look right here, you can see this is object mode. Object mode allows you to move entire objects around. What we want to do is we want to work on this, and we want to go to edit mode. When I say work on this, what I mean is 3D objects are typically made up of vertices, edges, and faces. And by us manipulating those vertices, edges, and faces, we can make what we want basically in 3D. So with this cube selected on, we can tell it's selected because it has this orange outline around it. We're going to click here where we see object mode, these two arrows, we're going to click here. I'm left clicking. Then we're going to left click for edit mode. Okay, so here in edit mode, now we can see we have this option to select vertices, edges, or faces. So, and we also want to make sure that, you know, we know where we're at. Currently, we're in the front view. Okay, so we're in the front view. Let's make our background image go to where it just shows up on the side view. And I'll explain why that is in a moment. Eventually, we're going to have, you know, a side view, front view, as well as the back view. When we look here, see where it says all views. So this means all views. So in every view, we'll see this image. However, what we can do is we can click here and then we can click right view. So I'm going to left click here. Now, when I clicked right view, we no longer can see the image. We can't see the image because when you look here, we're in front orthographic view. So we're going to click right view and there's the image. When I click back to front view, now we don't see the image. Okay, as far as orthographic view, remember I had told you that orthographic view is like a kind of like a blueprint view. And what I mean by that is it kind of is a view that allows you to look at 3D objects like as if they're 2D. You will only see the background image, how we set it up, you know, how it's currently set up in Blender. You'll only see this background image when you are on orthographic view. So if I hold the middle mouse button and change the view, well, right now it says a user ortho, but if we're on user perspective, you won't see that background view. Now, the reason why I have it set to right view right now, you might say, well, why do you have it there so we can't see it? The reason why is I have a very quick standard, process for making low poly cars. So we're just going to do that right now. So we can get through the basic shape very quickly. And then once we have that, we'll take that basic shape and try to, for the most part, make that match up with the background image. Okay, so how can we get through this basic, shape image that I'm talking about and get through it fairly quickly? Well, we're going to press A to deselect. We're then going to click here to go to face select. We're going to click here, hold shift, click here. I'm going to let go of shift. I'm now going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm now going to re-hold shift and then click here. When you hold shift, it allows you to select more than one face and keep all of those faces, vertices, or edges, still selected. So it allows you to select more than one vertice, edge, or face and then keep them selected as well. So anyway, with these faces selected, we're going to click front view. We're just going to front view, so we know that this is front here, top, back, right? I'm going to hold control in the middle mouse button to zoom in. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hold Alt. Then while holding Alt, I'm going to press E. And this brings up the extrude menu. So once this extrude menu pops up, I'm going to click here where it says individual faces. I'm going to left click once. When I left click, now you can see I have these two black arrows over my cursor. I'm going to drag down. And basically what you see there is the faces going out in each direction that they were kind of in. So I'm going to left click to lock that in. Okay, the reason why we did that was by doing that, we were very quickly we were to make the front of the car, the back of the car, as well as the top of the car. And you'll see what I mean as we go along. The tires would pretty much be right here, but we basically have the basic shape that we need for this car. So I'm going to click here. When I clicked here, it deselected there as well as there. I'm going to take this manipulator, push this down some like that. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to click here to go to the right view and then click here to go to right orthographic view. So now we can see that we have our background image here. However, our mesh here is blocking out the image. So when we look at this information here, we can click here. And now basically what we have is our background image showing through our mesh, which makes things a lot easier for us to work on or work with. Okay, since we're at this point, what we want to do is take this green line right here, and we want to have this line up with the bottom of our tires with our image. So we have these options right here for working with our reference image. I'm going to hover here and then pull this out a little bit. Now I can see it. So I was looking for this X as well as this Y, where we can basically move our image around using these controls. Okay, what we want to do now is just have these tires sit right on top of that green line right there. So we're going to go to our Y value. We're going to left click and drag. Okay, that went up that way, so we'll go the opposite way. And it looks pretty much like they're right on top there. I found that when you have to match up images, this helps a lot. So we're going to use this when we match up this front as well as this back here. So since we have that, what we're going to do is we're going to move our mesh up some. Now we don't want to move our mesh up some here. And when I say here, I mean in edit mode. See this dot right here? This dot is our origin point. If we move this mesh inside of edit mode, this origin point will move. We don't want to move this unless we want to move this. And when I say this, I mean this origin point. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here, go to object mode, right? So now that we're in object mode, we can move this mesh without being concerned about this origin point moving. So what we're going to do is pull this up, and we're just taking the bottom of this mesh shape right here and for the most part lining this up at the bottom of our car right there. Okay, now that we have this bottom lined up, what we're going to do is click here to go to edit mode, and since our origin point is there, now we can easily manipulate our mesh. So see this line right here? We want this line to pretty much be right here, right? So we're going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate. The image in the background disappeared because we're not in because you actually have to be in like front, right, left, back, top, bottom orthographic view to see the image. So you'll find a lot of times that actually helps you out, that when you move, that image disappears. So anyway, with that being said, we're going to click here. We're going to hold shift. We're then going to click here while holding shift, so we have both of these faces selected at the same time. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to click here to go to the right view. Now we're going to take our manipulator. Our manipulator is this object that you see right here. We're going to take the blue arrow and push this down. So we push these faces down just so they matched up with this line right here. Okay, what we're going to do now is hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to press A to deselect. We're going to click here to make sure we're on face select. We're going to hold the Alt key. Because we're holding the Alt key, when we click here, which I'm not doing yet, but we're about to, this entire loop of faces will be clicked or selected. So I'm going to click here, and now that whole, I let go of Alt. Now this whole loop of faces is selected. I'm now going to hold Shift to select this first face as well. Just let go of Shift. I'm now going to click here to go back to right view. Okay, since we have this entire, piece of this mesh selected, what we want to do is see this right here. We want to push forward here until this matches up with that there. So we're going to use our manipulator to go forward. So we're just going to push forward. And now we can see here, this line here is matched up right there, and that's what we want. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to press A to deselect. We're going to make sure we're still on face select, which we are. We're going to click here on the front here. We're going to click here to go back to the right view again. Okay, so what we're going to do with this face selected is we're going to push, not to here, we're going to push some past here to about there. So I'm just going to take the manipulator and push to about there. Okay, so we still have this face selected here. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate just to make sure. And we do have this still selected. So I'm going to click here to go back to right view. What we're going to do now is we're going to press E. And when we pressed E, you can see a preview line. It's kind of like a bluish line that went forward. That's showing that's how we're going to extrude. I'm going to right click to get this extrusion to stay in place. When an extrusion is when you actually make new geometry. So far we extruded to make the original front back of this. Now we're extruding again just to make this piece to push forward to right here. So with that done, we're going to take the green part of the manipulator and just push this forward to about here like that. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to press A to deselect. Instead of selecting face, we're going to go to edge select. So with this selected, we're going to click right here. We're then going to click right view to go back to this view here. Okay, typically I'll change the view just so I know for sure that I have what I want selected. From this image here, from this view here, it doesn't look like we have the edge selected. However, we know it's selected because we just, changed the view and made sure that this was selected. So with this edge selected, we're going to take the manipulator and push down here like that. Now we have this edge, so we're just going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to press A to deselect. We still have edge select on, so we're going to click here, then click right view. Now we'll take this manipulator and push this down like that. So then I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is very similar to what we did before. We want to select this right here. So I'm going to hold the mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here to go to face select. I'm going to hold Alt. Because we're holding Alt when we click here, so I'm going to left click here now. I'm going to let go of Alt. Now we selected that entire loop of faces. I'm now going to hold Shift, and then while holding Shift, I'm going to left click here. I'm now letting go of Shift. I'm now going to click here to go back to our right view so we can see our reference image again. Okay, what we're going to do now is hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. And we just did that to give ourselves a little bit more room to work. Okay, so with this geometry here selected, we're going to take our manipulator. We're just going to click right on the green arrow, and we're going to pull back. Okay, what we want to do is pull this line back to here. So what we're going to do is press A to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here to go to edge select. And then I'm going to hold Alt and then click here. Now when I held Alt, I know from working on this tutorial before, the edges are selected, just not the top edge. So if we look around, we can see the edges are selected except for the top. So we're going to hold Shift, and then while holding Shift, click here. Now I'm going to let go of Shift. I'm then going to click here to go back to right view, so we can see our reference image. Okay, the reference image that we're using is of a 2015 Mustang. So if you search Mustang 2015 blueprint, you should be able to find that image. Okay, so with this edge selected, we want to pull this from here to here. So we're going to take this manipulator and pull this back like that. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're currently selected on edge select. We're going to click here to go to face select. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here, then click here to go back to right view. I'm going to take this manipulator and push straight down like that. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here to go to edge select. I'm then going to click this edge right here. Then I'm going to click here to go back to our right view. Then I'm going to take this manipulator and pull that edge back like that. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, we have the basic shape for the side view. Now we want to set up the front view. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring in another reference image. It's the same reference image, but it's going to be seen as Blender as being another image. And we're going to use that to help us form the front shape of this. So what we're going to do is click here to go to the front view. I'm going to hold Shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, when you look here, you can see we're in front orthographic view. So what we want to do is we have our image here, right? It says right view. So what we want to do is see where this says add image. We want to click this. Now we have the option set up where we can add another image. Now we could click open and search for the same image. However, and that's what you would do if you had an actual separate image. But since all of our images, our front side as well as our back are all in the same image, since we're using the same image, we can click right here, one of these two arrows. So we'll just click there. And then Blender remembers the image that we were previously using. So we're going to left click here, and now we can see here's that image. Okay, what we need to do now is set up our reference image here so that it matches up with our front 3D mesh right here. So we're going to use our controls here to do that. Okay, so we're going to left click and drag here, this Y setting, and what we're trying to do is see the red line there. We're trying to get the tires put right on top of that red line. When you're dragging here, if you want fine control, you can hold the shift key and that will make your movements finer. When I look here, this looks like this is what I want. Okay, currently this image is good as far as the height. Now we want to move this over so that this front image of the car is matched up and right center on this blue line. So let's go to where we see this as back front, then click front. And what that did is that allows us to see our mesh through this image here. So now I'm going to hold shift for fine control. I'm going to then left click and drag right here. And I'm going to let go of left click, and now I'm letting go of shift. Okay, this is set up for our front. Right now we have this saying all views. We don't want that. We want to click here, set this to front view. So now this image will only work with the front view. With that done, what that means is now when we click front view is the only time we'll see this. So we previously set up for our right view. So when I click right view, we can see that this image that is technically the same as the other image is set up for our right view. And then when we click front, now we have this set up for the front view. So now we want to do the same thing for the back view. Okay, so we want this car sitting on the red line. So we know that our front image is sitting on the red line. Our back image, for the most part, is as well. Let's zoom in here. Okay. Actually, you can see with the back image that the tires go down a little bit lower. So what we can do is, okay, now the tires are sitting right on that red line. So, okay, that's good. So now we see that this, we know this height will be correct for our rear image. So what we're going to do is we're going to left click here. We're going to hold control. While holding control, press C to copy this setting. I'm then going to left click to lock that copy in or to get out of that setting. So what we want to do now is we're going to click add image. We're going to scroll down. Now we have this settings for a new image. We're going to click here, click this image here. This is the same image. Blender knows we've been working with this. We're going to left click there. Now we're going to scroll down some more. So now where it says Y, we're going to left click here. And then we're going to paste in what we just copied as far as the height. So we're going to hold control. And then while holding control, we're going to press V. And then we can either click to the side or press enter to lock that value in. I'm just going to left click here. So now the image is in. So see how you see this image going over the previous image? The reason for that is when you look up here, it says all views. So what we want to do is click here, one of these two arrows. So we're going to left click, and then we're just going to look for back, and then we're going to select back view. So now we should only see that view when we have our view set for back. So currently we're in front orthographic view. So now we'll click back. So here we are in back orthographic view. So now we can see here's that image. So we want to make sure that we can see our mesh through the image. So let's also click front view here for the back. So that front view is set for our front, for our side, our right view, our front view, as well as our back view. Okay, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Now we need to have this back view centered right on this blue line. So what we can do is left click and drag. I'm going to hold shift now as I drag and that looks about center. So I'm going to let go of the left mouse button. Now I'm letting go of shift, and that looks right. Okay, what we're going to do now is click here to go to front view. Okay, I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan view. I'm going to take a look now, and basically what we're doing, the reason, even though our shape is a very basic shape, the reason why we want these images lined up is these images will help us, these reference images, as far as working with our basic shape. But even more so than that, we're going to use these reference images and the fact that they're right set up with our mesh to give detail to our low poly mesh. Okay, what we're going to do now to make things easier for us as we work is we're going to put a mirror modifier on this. What a mirror modifier does is it effectively allows you to do about half the work you normally would have to do. So to do that, we're going to hover here over around the center point of this mesh. We're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press R. You can see that line right there, right through the center. That's our preview line for our loop cut. We're going to left click once, then left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. Okay, now that we have that loop cut in, we're set up where we can get rid of this side of this mesh. You might say, why would you want to do that? We want to do that because we want this side to copy exactly this side. And that's what the mirror modifier will do once we put it on. So we're going to click here to go to face select. We're going to press Z. We're then going to go to wireframe. We're going to hover our mouse around here. We're going to press B for box select. We're going to left click and drag a little bit past the center point. Then let go of left click. So now we have this whole side of this geometry selected. Because we went to wireframe view, we selected what we can see as well as what we couldn't see in the back as far as the angle. So now we're going to press X to bring up our delete menu and then choose faces to delete. We're now going to click here, go to object mode. We're going to press Z, go back to solid view. We're now going to click on what looks like a wrench here. We see this add modifier menu. We're going to click here. We're then going to look for our mirror modifier, which is here. We're then going to left click. When we left clicked, it looks like our half came back, and in a sense it did. However, now it's basically a virtual half, which is being done from this mirror modifier. So what we want to do is put a check mark here for clipping. We're now going to click here and then go back to edit mode. And then now when we look here, we can see, okay, this has these lines and dots. This one doesn't. To make this part of the geometry that's being generated from a mirror modifier look like this part, what we can do is click what looks like this triangle here. And now this side looks just like that side. So the reason why we do this is whatever work we do on this side will now be done to this side. So when you're dealing with objects that are symmetrical, this saves a lot of time. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to press A to select everything. Now, with this mirror modifier, we have this option for clipping turned on. What that means is this part of the geometry will not pull apart from this part of the geometry. If this clipping was off when I pulled on this side would separate, but the clipping makes this being the mesh, stay connected. So because this is on, we can pull to the side, and that will kind of look like we're scaling the geometry, even though we're not. In a sense, we are, but we're not technically scaling. So long story short, with that being said, what we're going to do now is we're going to pull this out like this to the sides of our car. So now we have the width of our car here. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to press A to deselect. We're going to make sure we're on face select, which we are. We're going to click here, then click here to go back to front view. We're then going to take the manipulator and we're pushing this top over to get it fairly close to the width that you see right here for our reference image. Okay, when you look here, we need to deal with this space right here. So we're going to hold them in the mouse button to rotate the view. We're then going to press A to deselect. Okay, we're going to hover our mouse here. We're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press R to put a loop cut in. I'm going to move my mouse. You didn't see the loop cut at first, but when you move your mouse, you should see it. So I'm going to left click once. Because only left click once, I can move this loop cut. I'm going to move my mouse up. like that. I'm then going to left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to click here. Because we have this extra geometry here, we can push this without affecting the geometry too much there. So let's go to front view. And with that edge selected, we're going to push over. We're trying to match up this side geometry with the angle of the reference image. And it looks pretty close right there. Okay, when you look here, you can see a little piece sticking out. We're still on edge select. We're going to press A to deselect. We're then going to click here. Click here to go back to front view. We'll then push this over like that. We'll then press A to deselect. Okay, we're going to click here to go to right view. I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to pull this up, this being this, all the edges along the bottom up some. So I'm going to click here for vertex select. It's vertex for one, vertex for more than one. I'm going to press Z, then go to wireframe. I'm going to hover here. I'm going to press B for box select, grab all of these vertices right here, and I want to pull them from here to here. So I'm going to take this manipulator and pull that up. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, what we want to do now is we want to put a loop cut before as well as after where the tire is going to be. So we're going to hover here. We're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press R. That puts a loop cut preview there. I'm going to left click once. Because I only left click once, I can move this loop cut. So I'm going to move it right here. I'm going to left click to lock that in. I'm then going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hover here, hold control. While holding control, press R. I have that loop cut preview going horizontal. And I don't want it going horizontal. I want it going vertical. So I'm going to move it up. I'm going to left click once. Because I left click once, I can move this loop cut. So I'm going to move it to here. I'm then going to left click a second time to lock that in. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, I want to put a loop cut here as well as here. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button, rotate the view. I'm going to press Z, then go to solid view. Now, one of the issues is if I put a loop cut here, what's going to happen is the loop cut's going to ride up and then go here. I really don't want that. I don't want the loop cut to go past here. So I have this. I don't want the loop cut to go past here, right? So we have this geometry here. So what I can do is I'm going to hold them in the mouse button. I can go to face select. I can click this face right here. I can press H to hide that face. So that face is still there. It's just temporarily hidden. Now I can go back to right view. Now I can come here, hold control. While holding control, press R. Then left click once, because I only left click once. I can move the loop cut. Then I can put the loop cut here. I'm then going to left click again. I'm now going to hover here. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold control. While holding control, I'm going to press R. I have a horizontal preview. I don't want that. I want vertical, so I move my mouse up. I left click once, because I only left click once. I can move this loop cut. And then I'm going to drag this to here. I'm then going to left click a second time to lock that in. I'll then press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold them in a mouse button to rotate the view. So we put these loop cuts in. We were able to control where they went by hiding this face here. Now we're going to hold Alt, and then while holding Alt, press H to bring back that face. So we got what we wanted as far as being able to control that particular loop cut. So that's useful to know. If you don't want a loop cut to go a certain way, you can use that to have the loop cuts go where you want. Because this is a pretty low poly mesh, it really shouldn't cause you issues. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to click here. Whoops, we're going to go to face select. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to hold shift. While holding shift, I'm going to press S. This brings up our snap to menu. I'm then going to choose cursor to selected. I brought the cursor here because in Blender where the cursor goes is, or I should say where the 3D cursor is at, is where objects tend to come into Blender at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold shift. While holding shift, press A. This brings up our add to menu. I'm then going to select cylinder. you see this cylinder coming in here. If you look right to your left, you'll see this says vertices 32. I don't want that many vertices. So I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to change this to 8 and then press enter to lock that in. I want to turn these cylinders. So what I'm going to do is press R to rotate on the Y axis. You can see there's a preview line showing us how this is going to turn. By me moving the mouse, it doesn't affect what I'm about to do next. When I press 9-0, it being Blender rotates this from the original position these were brought in at. So now the cylinders are correct. So I'm going to left click to lock that in. I'm going to click here to go back to right view. And then I'm going to press S to scale. I'm going to left click to lock that scale in. I'm going to take the manipulator to push this down to the place where the tires should be at. Okay, now I'm going to go to front view. You can see how thick that cylinder is. So we're going to press S to scale on the X axis to scale that down. I'm going to left click to lock that in. I'm then going to take the manipulator and push this into place. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. What I'm going to do is press A to deselect. I'm going to make sure I'm on face select. I'm going to click right here. Okay, right here. You don't want that face selected, so let me press A to deselect. You want to click right here. You're going to hold shift. While holding shift, press D. I'm going to right click. So I made new geometry by duplicating the old geometry. It's still in the same position. I'm holding the middle mouse button. So there's a face that's separate from this tire here, right? So I'm going to press A to deselect. It looks like there's nothing there. It looks like it's part of this tire, but it's not. So we're going to hover here with face select on. We're going to press L to select the tire. Remember, there's a face here. It's just so close that you can't see it. We're about to hide this tire, so we're going to press H to hide the tire. Now you can see that face that's left right there. So with that there, I'm going to click here to go back to right view. Okay, what we're going to do is put another loop cut in that's closer to the tire. So we're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press R. We're going to left click one time. Because we left click one time, we can move this loop cut. So let's move it to here. I'm then going to left click a second time to lock this loop cut in. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. This is basically here as a guide. That's what this is for. So we're going to click to go to face select. We're going to click this square that's right next to our guide here. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view, where I just held the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold shift, then click here. So with this selected, as well as this selected, I'm going to press X. This brings up our delete menu. I'm then going to choose faces to delete. Okay, what we're going to do is click here to go to our right view. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hover my mouse here, hold shift, then B, and then I drew a box. In that box, when you press shift B, you can zoom in to wherever that box is at. We need to match up these vertices to our mesh here. So we need this vertex to have something to match up to. So how do we get a vertex here? We can put a loop cut. So we're going to hold control. While holding control, press R. I'm then going to left click once, then left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. I'll then press A to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to go to vertice select. I'll click this vertex here. I'll zoom in. My manipulator's in the way, so I can click here to temporarily take that manipulator out of the way. I'll hold shift, then click here. I'll now press F. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to click here, hold shift, then click here. I'm going to let go of shift. I'll click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll then press F. I'll click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll then press F. I'll click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll then press F. Okay, so why did we do that? The reason why we did that was, we need this here, so we need to, we'll click here, hold shift, then click here. then press F. We need to have this connection so we could fill in this space right here. So we'll go to edge select now. We'll click here. We should only need, well, we'll click them all. We'll press F to fill that in. Then we'll click here, hold shift, still holding shift. Then I'll click here, press F is here. What I'm saying here, I'll click here, hold shift, click here, click here, click here. Then I'll let go of shift and press F, holding the middle mouse button to pan the view, pressing, I was holding shift and the middle mouse button to press the view, pan the view. I'm going to press A to deselect. So now I'll click here, hold shift, still holding shift, still holding shift. Now I'm letting go of shift and I'll press F. Okay, so basically that gives us the basic shape of the wheel well. So now we'll click here, then press X. And then that brings up our delete menu. We'll then choose faces to delete. So now we have a basic wheel well shape here. Most of the time while you're working in Blender, there's multiple ways of doing things. This is just my particular way for doing this here. What we're going to do now is we're going to hold Alt. While holding Alt, we're going to press H. I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hover here, press L to highlight that. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'll then click here to go to right view. Okay, with this tire selected, I'm going to press and hold Shift. I'll then press D. I'll then right click to get that duplicate to stay in place. We don't see the manipulator because we currently have it hidden. We can click this button right here to bring it back. So we just made a duplicate of this tire. So we're going to take the manipulator and pull this duplicate back like that. Okay, so what are we going to do here? We're pretty much going to do the same thing here that we did before. So what we're going to do is we're going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We'll press A to deselect. We'll click right here on this face. We'll hold shift. While holding shift, press D. We'll then right click to get the duplicate to stay in place. We'll press A to deselect. We'll then hover here. We'll press L. When we press L, it basically selects objects, and it's an easy way to do it. So with this selected, we'll press H to temporarily hide that. Now we have our guide face here. Okay, what we're going to do now is hover our mouse about here. We're going to hold shift. While holding shift, press B. We'll draw a zoom box to zoom in. We have face select on, so we'll click here. We'll press X to bring up our delete menu. Then choose faces to delete. We'll then hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Click here. We'll then press X to bring up our delete menu. Then choose faces to delete. I'll now click right to go back to our right view. We'll hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. I'll now let go of the middle mouse button as well as shift. Okay, we're going to need a loop cut right here. However, I don't want that to ride up. So with face select on, I'm going to click here. I'm going to press H to temporarily hide that face. So with this face hidden, I'm going to hold control. While holding control, I'm going to press R. I'm then going to left click once, then left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. I'll then press A to deselect. Now that I have this loop cut here, I can bring back that hidden geometry. So I'll hold Alt, then press H. I'll then press A to deselect. And now we need to do like we did before. So we'll click here to go to vertice select. Okay, since we unhid this, our tire unhid, so we need to go to face select, hover here, press L, then press H to rehide that. We'll then click right view. I want this to be straight, just, for aesthetic reasons. So I'm going to hover here, press L. I'm then going to press G, then Y, and then hold shift for fine movement. I'm then going to left click and then let go of shift. If you're like, why did I press G and then Y? The reason why I did that was I pressed G to grab this. So when I press G, I can move this up. I can move it in any direction, right? However, I want it to be constrained to the Y axis, which is forward and back. So I press G for grab, then I press Y, and it constrained it, so it could go forward and back. And then I held shift after doing that, so that when I move this along the Y axis, it would move very, slightly underneath my control. So, okay, I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, now I'm going to go to vertices select. I'm going to click here. The manipulator is in the way, so I'm going to click here to temporarily take the manipulator out of the way. I'm going to hold shift. I'll click here, then press F. I'll press A to deselect, and I'll click here, hold shift, then click here, then press F. I'll press A to deselect. I'll click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll press F, then press A to deselect. I'll click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll then press F. I'll then press A to deselect. I'll click here, hold shift, then click here. I'll then press F and then press A to deselect. Okay, now with that done, I'm going to click here to go to edge select. I'll click here, hold shift, click here, here as well as here. I'll then press F. I'll then press A to deselect. I'll click here, hold shift, and while holding shift, I'm clicking here. Then I'll press F. F is fill, by the way. I then press A to deselect. I'll then click here, hold shift, click here, here, here. I'll let go of shift. Now I'll press F to fill. I'll press A to deselect. I'm now clicking here. I'm now holding shift. While holding shift, I'm clicking here. While holding shift, I'm clicking here. Now I'm letting go of shift. Now I'm pressing F. Now I'm pressing A to deselect. Okay, what I'm going to do now is hold control as well as hold the middle mouse button to pull back the zoom back. You can zoom back just by rolling your mouse. However, when you hold control as well as zoom back, you get a smoother zoom. With face select on, I'm going to hover here, press L. I'm going to press H to temporarily hide that geometry there. I'm going to hold shift and middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to let go, shift and middle mouse button. I'm going to hover here, hold shift. While holding shift, press B. I'm then going to draw a zoom box to zoom in to here. What I'm going to do here is click on vertices select. I'm going to push these vertices like this out. When you do this, I'm going to click here to turn back on our, see that when I push how that line is right there, so I'll bring this back. You want to push so that if things start looking strange, you know, try to control it, being the general shape. You also don't want to have vertices cross over edges or vertices, for the most part, cross over other vertices. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom back. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to hover here, hold shift. While holding shift, press B. This lets me draw a zoom box to zoom in right here. With vertices select on, I'm pretty much going to do the same or similar thing. See how when I push there too far, so I just come back and click here, and I'm generally just pushing on the Y-axis as well as the Z-axis using our manipulator. Now I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom out. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. I'm holding the middle mouse button to take a look. I'm going to hold Alt. While holding Alt, press H to bring back our tires. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, with this view, we can actually see the underside of our low poly car. So we're going to click here. We're going to press C for paint select. We're going to click here as well as here, as well as here. I'm then going to right click to get out of paint select. I'm then going to press X, which brings up our delete menu. I'm then going to choose faces to delete. I'm then going to click here to go back to right view. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button as well as taking a look again. Okay, when we look here, this is fairly boxy. If we click this and move this back, this will give us more of a curve. However, if we do that, because there's only a loop cut here, all of this geometry will move. We only want the geometry to move around this area. So what we're going to do is hold control. While holding control, press R to put a loop cut in. We'll left click once and then left click a second time. Now that we did that, we can press A to deselect. Make sure we're on edge select. Click here. I'm going to hold control, and then while holding control, click here. I let go of control. The reason why I held control is I use something called the shortest path in Blender. It's when you click more than one vertice, edge, or face, I believe. If you click the one part and then the last part, Blender will select the shortest path between the two things that you picked. So with that done, I'm going to take this manipulator and pull back some like that. I'm going to take this manipulator and push in some like that. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, let's make this a little bit more rounded. So we're going to hover here. We're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press R. I'm going to left click once, then left click a second time to lock that loop cut in. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, with edge select on, we're going to use that shortest path option. I rolled the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to click here, hold control, then click here. Now I'm going to hold shift, click here. Now I'm holding shift as well as control. Now I'm going to click here. Now I'm letting go of shift as well as control. Okay, I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan the view. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to take the manipulator and push forward like this here. I'm then going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click here, hold control, then click here for the shortest path. Push that forward like that. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to click here, hold control, then click here. I'm then going to push that forward like that. Then I'm going to press A to deselect. So now I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to I held control and the middle mouse button to zoom out. Now I'm holding shift and the middle mouse button to pan the view. Now I'm holding the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan the view. Okay, for the back now, we're going to click here, hold control, then click here. We're going to hold shift, click here. I'm holding shift as well as control. I'm going to then click here. I'm now going to pull this back like that. I'm now going to click here. Here's where I want it. I'm now going to hold control. I'm not holding shift. I'm going to click here, hold control, pull that back. I'm going to click here, hold control. Okay, I'm going to click here, hold control. Now I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, now I'm going to click here to go to right view. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. You can see we have this, we've rounded this, but we pulled this back some beyond our reference image. So what we'll do is click here to go to vertice select. We'll press Z, go to wireframe. We'll then press B. We'll then click, well, not click, we'll select all these vertices here and just push this in like that. We'll press A to deselect. We'll click here. Push them in, something like that. Press A to deselect, press B. That. Press A to deselect, press B. For box select. Push these in like that. Press A to deselect. Okay, see we have the same thing up here, so we'll press B. Grab here. Pull that in, then press A to deselect. Okay, what we're going to do now is press Z, go to solid view. We'll hold the middle mouse button to take a look. I'm holding shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Zoom in. I'm going to click here to go to edge select. I'll hold control, then click here. Hold the middle mouse button to rotate. I'll press A to deselect. I'll click here. And I'm just pushing here because I don't think it'll cause the texture to not look right. However, this is making our model look a little bit less boxy. So I'm going to click here to go back to right view. Okay, we're going to hold the middle mouse button to take a look. We have our basic shape. So we're going to go right here to this triangular looking button right here. We're going to left click and drag to split our view. Essentially what we did was we made a split view of this same view. So this view is the same as this view. However, we can click here and then select UV image editor. So we'll left click here. Okay, we split this view so we could UV unwrap this. UV unwrapping is when you take a 3D object and lay it out flat so that you can put 2D images on it. I find that I get good results using smart UV unwrapping. Typically what you would do is you would manually put seams in your 3D object, and that helps Blender know how you want it to lay down flat. However, Blender does have a way of doing this in a sense automatically. That's what we're going to use now. To do that, you're going to press A, which selects your entire mesh. You're then going to press U, and this brings up your UV mapping menu. And then what you're going to do is go to Smart UV Project. So you're going to left click, and then you see these options pop up. You're then going to click OK. And then what you have here is your 3D object essentially laid out flat right here. Okay, for what we're doing here, we need to have multiple UVs. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here. Looks kind of like a triangle. See where this says UV maps? We're going to double click here. We're going to name this main. Then press enter. We're then going to hit plus. We're going to double click here. We're going to name this right. We're then going to go to right view. And then with this here on right view, what we're going to do is we're going to press U, and then now what we're going to do is we're going to select project from view. So now what project from view is it is literally what you see here laid out flat right there. So we have two UVs right now. So we click here, there's our main UV, and now when we click right, we can see here's our UV set up just for our right view. Okay, now we need a front UV. So what we're going to do is click here. We're going to double click here, name this front, press enter. We're then going to click front here. And then we're going to click U and then select project from view. And what you can see here is the front. However, in half, that's fine because we have a mirror modifier on it on this. That's why you're seeing the front of this low poly car laid out flat, but just a half. Okay, now we need a back UV, so we're going to click here. We'll then double click here. We'll then name this back, then press enter. What we're going to do now is I'm going to press N to take away this property panel. I'm then going to click here to go to the back view. I'm then going to press U and then project from view. Okay, now that we have all of our UVs set up, we're going to click on our main UV. We're then going to click on what looks like these two triangles here on one of them. Left click there and then select texture paint. Okay, what we need to do now is click on this tools panel. We'll see this message saying missing data. It's saying that because there's no image to paint on. So we'll click where we see it says add paint slot. We'll select diffuse color. We'll click here. We'll change this to main texture. We'll then click here. We'll click here. Because our car is a reddish color, we'll pick a reddish color as well. I'll just move away from that. I'll then click OK. When we look here, we don't see any change. What we need to do is click here and then select main texture. So I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. Okay, what we're going to do now is click here. We're going to select clone for our clone brush. We're then going to click slots. We're then going to change this painting mode from material to image. We have our main map, we have our UV map set for our main. That's what we want. What we want to do now is look for where we see canvas image. We're going to click here. Then we're going to select main texture. Okay, what we need to do now is click on our tools panel. And then we want to select, or not select, we want to put a check mark next to clone from image. So then it wants to know where, what's the image that we want to clone from. So we click here and we can see here's the image we've been using for our reference image. So we're going to left click that. Okay, what we're going to do now is press N to bring up our properties panel. We're going to scroll up. We're then going to take away the check mark next to background images. We're then going to press N to take away the properties panel. Okay, what we're going to do now that our texture pane is set up, as far as the brushes, as where to clone from, we're going to click here, go back to object mode. We're going to press Z. We're going to select shade smooth. Now we're going to click here, go back to edit mode. Okay, here in edit mode, we're going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. I'm going to click here to go to phase select. I'm going to hover here. I'm going to press L. I'm then going to hover here, press L. I'm then going to press P to bring up our separate menu. I'm then going to choose selection. So we separated the tires by selection. I'm then going to click here, then go to object mode. Okay, what we're going to do now in object mode is we're going to press A to deselect. We're going to click here. We're then going to click here and then go to edit mode. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We want to make these tires look more round. I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. So we're going to press A to select the tires. We're then going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press 2. That put a subdivision surface modifier on here with a view of 2. You can see they don't look right. They need to have a few loop cuts to make them look right. So what we're going to do is press A to deselect. We're going to hold control. While holding control, we're going to press R. We're then going to left click once. Because we left click once, we can move this loop cut. We're going to pull that to the side. And as we pull it to the side, you can see that makes a nice hardness to this. And now we need to do the same thing to the other side. So we're going to hold control. While holding control, press R. Left click once. Because we left click once, we can move this. We'll just pull that over to the side like that. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to hold control. While holding control, press R. I'm going to move my mouse so I have a vertical loop cut. Left click once, then drag this to the side. Then I'm going to hover here, hold control. While holding control, press R. Left click once, then drag that to the side. I'm then going to right click, or left click, sorry, to lock that in. Not right click, left click to lock that in. I'm then going to click on this wrench. Looks like a wrench. We're going to put go to this modifier panel. We're going to click here. Okay, so now that we have that done, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our navigation tab. We're going to click to go to a right view. We're going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm holding shift. I keep letting go and holding the mouse to pan. I'm going to let go of shift now, hold control to zoom out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to press A to select our tires. We're going to click on what looks like a triangle to get to our UV. We're going to click right UV. Even though we separated these, we still have the UV maps that are on these tires since we put the UV on our car when these tires were still part of the other mesh. I'm going to zoom in here by rolling my mouse wheel. See how these are nice and circular here. I'm going to click here. I'm going to bring in our reference image. And when I do that, you can see now the tires are no longer circular. They're kind of squished. The way we can deal with that, as long as we're, set up here for our UV, everything is pretty much set up for our right UV. So we can very simply press U and then select project from view. And then now with that, we see, you know, here's our edges for our tires. Work with our UVs and our circular again. So I'm going to press, try to press S. I don't know why I pressed that. I'm going to press A, then I'm going to press S. So I was trying to do it beforehand. Okay, so I'm going to press S. So I'm pressing S and moving, just trying to get these into position. Pressing G now. Press S. And I move these both at the same time. However, I don't have to move them both at the same time. So I can press A. I can hover here. Then I can press L. And then press G. Okay, let me press Z. I'm thinking, I'm going to press B to box select. Now I'll press G. There we go. So you want to box select that. And just move that into position. So I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to click here and then select. Okay, I don't want that. I want to select texture. And now we can see the texture right there. I'm going to click here, go to object mode. I'm going to click here, hold shift, press D to duplicate this light. I'll push that light forward. I'll hold shift D to duplicate another light. I'll pull this light back. I'll press shift D to duplicate another light. I'll hold shift them and the mouse button to pan. I'll hold them and the mouse button to rotate the view, and our tires look pretty decent. Okay, we do need to add another UV map to this. And when I say this, I mean our main car mesh. I'm going to click on that. So for our UV maps, we have main, right, front, back. I'm going to click on back. I'm then going to click the plus button. I'm then going to double click here and name this top. Then press enter to lock that in. I'm then going to click here, then go to edit mode. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to, with our navigation tab selected, I'm going to click top here. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan the view. And what I have is I have in another image that I found that is the top of 2015 Mustang GT. So what we're going to do is we're going to press A to select right here. Then we're going to press U. Then we're going to select project from view. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to click open. I'm going to go to where that top image is, which is right here. I'm going to click this. I'm then going to click open image, and we can see it right there. Okay, you can see when it came in, when I say it, I mean this image right here, that this is no longer in proportion. So what we can do is press U and then project from view again. And now this is, you know, looks much better. Roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. So what we're going to do is press A to select this. We're going to press R to rotate, -90, and then press enter to lock that in. Okay, so we're going to press S to scale this up. I'm going to press G. I'm going to press S to scale this up. Press G. Press S to scale this up. I'll press G. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this at the pretty much halfway point. I'm going to press S to scale on the X-axis. The X-axis is basically left and right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press G and move this to about center line. Then I'm going to right click right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make our mesh that's over in our UV image editor scale according to this. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to go from, I believe it's Oh, it's for here. It's bounding box center is the default. Okay, so I'm gonna go to 2D cursor. So now I'm gonna press S to scale in the Y axis, and what that does is it allows me to scale from here. So from doing that, this looks fairly decent here. I'm gonna press S to scale in the X axis. And I'm going to press A to deselect. Okay, this is out by itself, this being this group of vertices here. So I'm going to press B for box select. I'm going to grab those vertices right there, press G, move them into place. Working on this, I realized that this top view does some things very well, like this right here, it does very well. However, these doors are pretty much done better, I think, by the side view. So you can kind of look right here. When I say doors, I mean like the windows that come up. You can kind of look right here and see like this is where they really should be. So let's try to move these up more. And when we go through our technique, we probably won't use these doors. So we want to, these windows here, we're more concerned about this right here. You'll hopefully you'll understand as we go through it. Okay, so what I want is to pull this up here. I'm more concerned about this right here, moving over. If we go right here, this is basically our vertex select here. This is our, should be equivalent to our edge selection here. So what we want to do is click here. Then we're going to press G and then move this over. The main reason why we're moving this over is so there's room for us to move this. So when we move this, when you look over here, you should see this line come this way. So I'm going to click here, then press G, and then move here. Like that. Now you might sit there and say, you know, this looks, that doesn't look right. It looks blurry. I don't think this is going to be an issue because I want us to use to come up, I want us to use the side view. However, this, I want to use this area here for the top view. Okay, now that we have this set up, what we want to do now is click. Do we set up the front view? Okay, here's the front view. So we clicked front view, so now we want to go to our navigation tab and then click front here. Now we want to click here and we want to select this. This is our main reference image here, so we want to click that. When we brought this in, you can see this is distorted. So what we can do is, where we have the front view here, we can press U and then select project from view, and now this isn't distorted like it was before. So now we can press A to select. We'll press G to move this to about center point. We're still selected for the 2D cursor to be what this scales from. So what we can do is press S to scale. We'll press G. S to scale. Okay, let's move a light over here. So I'm going to click here, go to object mode. I'm going to click here, hold shift, while holding shift, press D. I'm going to right click to keep that in place. Now I'm going to move this over here. I'm going to hold them in the mouse button. Bring this to the front. So now I'm going to go back to front view. And right now you just want to think about this from the front, make sure this looks decent. So we're going to click here. Whoops. We're going to click here, then click here, then go to edit mode. Something else we want to do is we want to have this light be right here. We want this light. Actually, we want this light to be right here. And the reason why we want that is because we want that so that we know how to match up our side view. So we're going to have to deal with that. So we'll click front view, and we'll press S to scale on the Y axis. I'm going to press G. I'll press Y. I'm going to press G and then X. Okay, so now that we have that light positioned, I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hover over here. I'm going to press B for box select. I'm going to press G and then Y. To push this down, I'll click here. I'm going to press O to turn on proportional editing. Proportional editing allows us to move more than one vertice, edge, or face at a time. I can roll the mouse wheel to increase the area of influence. I'm going to left click. Now I have this set for the 2D cursor. I need to set this back to the bounding box center. So I'm going to press G. I really don't want that light to be messed with, so I'm shrinking the area of influence down. This is the main area we want to be concerned about, particularly this light. Not so much there, because a lot of our top view will take care of this. We'll leave this how this is for now, strange as that looks. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click back, then click back to go to the back view. We're going to press A to select the back. We'll then click here and then select our reference image. We'll hover here, press A, press G to move this down. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to press U and then select project from view. I'm going to press G. I'm going to press O to turn off proportional editing. Okay, I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to press S and then Y. The main concern is this right here. This is the concern, not so much there. This right here. Okay, I'm going to press S and then Y. I'm going to press G, then Y. I'm going to press S and then X. I'm going to press S and then Y. I'm going to left click to lock that in. I'm going to press A to deselect. I'm going to hover my mouse right here, press B for box select. I'm then going to press G and then Y. I'm then going to left click to lock that in. I'm then going to press A to deselect. Okay, now we're going to go to what's most likely our most important UV map, which is our right view. So we're going to left click here, click on our navigation tab. We're already on it. In the navigation tab, we're going to click right view. We're going to click here and then click to bring in our reference image. You can see that this is kind of distorted. So what we're going to do is press on this side, press U and then project from view. Now we can see this isn't distorted anymore. Okay, so what we're going to do is press A to select our entire mesh. We're going to press G, then move this up. Now we're going to press S to scale. I'm going to press S to scale. Again, I'm going to press G. Move this up. I'm going to press S to scale. Press G. This is where we want our mesh to be as close as we can get it. This is the one that's really important. The other ones are important, but I mean this one is the one that's covering most of our car. And what I mean by that is, you know, when you see it from the side, that's a lot of the car. A lot of the angles it would be seen from, you're going to see the top, but this side portion takes up a lot of area that you are looking at. The top does too, but the top is the top. So just with that little bit, this looks pretty decent for how it, you know, the work we have here looks pretty good right now, I think. Okay, we're about to go to texture paint. Before we go, make sure that you have under UV maps, make sure you're clicked on main. And then with that done, we're going to click here and then click texture paint. Okay, here in texture paint, you want under UV maps, this should stay on main. You do not want to change this. As a matter of fact, I'm going to click this black arrow so we don't even see the UV maps over there. Okay, so here what we want to do is we want to click on tools. We want to look for our brush. The strength says 0.700. We want to left click and drag to take this all the way up. We want to make sure we're on our clone brush. And then with all of that done, this is what we want to change. Our main canvas is our main UV. However, this source clone UV map, this is what we want to change. So we're going to click here and change this to right. So what that's doing is this is going to click from our UV map that's set up for the right view. So because of the work we did before, this next work should go fairly quickly. So right here, we're going to press F to make our brush bigger. We're then going to come here and we're just going to paint. So as I'm holding down my mouse, sometimes I'm letting go, and that's letting Blender kind of catch up. So that looks good. Okay, if you've reached this part and you're like, why did we do all that just to, you know, go to the side? Couldn't we have just set this up to go to the side? Yes, we could have done that. This method gives us control. It's decent for what we're doing here as far as cars. It's also good for other things. So it gives us control. So with this, we just pretty much, you know, put this side on. You'll see as we continue to work, hopefully the advantages of doing things this way. So this right here is what we want to change as we work, along with our, you know, navigation. So this is the right side. So our right view, we want to click here. We're going to go now to front view. So then we're going to click tools. And then where we see our source clone UV map, it's currently set for right. Now we want this to be set for the front view. And what that does is that makes it so that we will clone from our front view. So I'm going to roll the mouse wheel, hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom in more. Basically what's going on is, even though we can't see it over here, we see what's being painted on. This is our main UV. we previously set up for the front UV to, allow us to be able to paint what we wanted. So once we start to paint, we clone from the work we did where we set up the front UV. So I'm left clicking, and as I paint, Blender is cloning. I let go. Now this is an issue right here because our lights are a little bit too low. So when you turn to the sides, you see that they're too low. So I know I said we weren't going to work with this. That was a plan. However, we're going to click here. We're going to click here, go back to edit mode. We're going to click front view. We're going to go to our navigation tab. We're going to click front. This actually needs to be up one. So we're going to click here. We're going to see if this will work. Yeah, that won't work. I was trying to see if I can get a loop select. I guess there's no loop to select. We're going to press B for box select. We're going to grab here. I'll press B again just to make sure. I'm going to press G and then try to pull this up. So I'm moving this and looking as I move, and I'm trying to get this how it is here. Okay, so now that we have that, we're going to click back on our main. We're going to click here. We're going to go back to texture paint. So now with the texture paint, we're going to clone again. And now this is matching up better. And we mainly want just this front part here. See how that light is it's almost going just in. It's not quite right. Okay, so now that we have that done, we're going to click Tools. Remember, this is what we changed where it says Source Clone UV Map. We go to Navigation so we can, paint in a good way. We're going to click back. Now we're going to go to Tools, and we have the back view so we can see, okay, this is the back view. What do we want to change this Source Clone UV Map to? We want to change this from front to back as well. So now we're going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Now we're going to paint here for the back view. When I'm letting go, it being Blender is updating. Just want you to be aware of that. Okay, so now we have that in. This right here it's most likely just lights, as far as having a difficult time seeing that. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to go to our navigation tab. We're going to select top to go to the top view. Rolling the mouse wheel to zoom out. I'm going to hold Shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. This is what I meant when the side view comes up to the side. So we're going to leave this. We're going to work with this right here. So what we want to do now is go to our Tools panel. This has stayed the same because this was the reference image that we used. Now we're going to click here, and we're going to select this top view here. So now with that top view selected, we have our Source Clone UV Map. So we're in the top view here. We can see here we need to change this to the top view. So we click here. So now we're ready to clone from the top view that we have. So we're going to click. And we're going to drag. So now I'm just pressing the mouse and letting go. And I'm going to press F to shrink this clone brush. We want to get the areas that are going to help us out. We don't want to paint to make it more difficult for ourselves. So I'm painting, and I am trying not to go over that that line where the windows are coming up from the side view. Okay, what you see here is not an editing mistake. When I edit videos, I open and close files. If you look right here, see where it says image here, there's a little asterisk there. This lets you know that you didn't save this image. When you save texture file work, you have to save the Blender file as well as the actual image. I didn't do that, so when I closed and then opened up the Blender file, I lost the source image. However, the good thing is the hard work is done, so we literally can get it back in seconds. And I'm going to do that now. So this provides an opportunity to review what we did before. So what we're going to do is we're going to click here and then change this to the reference image. We're then going to click here for navigation, change this to the right view. We can see we're in the right view here. So we're going to go to our tools panel and we're going to look here where it says source clone UV map. We're going to change this to the right view as well. Okay, with this set for the right view, I'm going to press F, make my clone brush bigger, and then I'm just going to paint. And you can see just that quick, we're right back. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go here where we see image. I'm going to click here. I'm then going to click save as image. I'm then going to make a textures folder. Press enter. Then click in that textures folder and then click save as image. You'll see now that where this says image, there's no little asterisk symbol. So this is safe now to, this being Blender is safe to close and then open without being concerned about losing the image now. Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to click on our navigation tab. We're going to go to front view. We're now going to click on our tools panel. We can see we're in front view here. So when we look to our source clone UV map, let's click here and then change this to front view as well. Okay, I'm going to hold control as well as the middle mouse button to zoom in. I'm going to press F and then shrink my brush. So last time our headlights look kind of strange. So what I'm going to try to do this time is see what happens if we kind of dodge them. See if we can go around them. I'm pressing F to shrink my area of influence. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button. I think that looks better like that. Okay, I'm going to go to image. See the asterisk symbol is back. I'm going to click save image. And now the asterisk symbol is gone because now we're safe again. Okay, what we're going to do now is go to our navigation tab. We're then going to click back to go to the back view. We're then going to go to our tools tab. We can see we're in the back view here. So now we see source clone UV map. We can click here and then change this to the back view. So with that done, I can press F to make my brush bigger and then paint right here. Okay, so now I'm going to go to image. and then save image. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to click navigation tab. I'm going to click top to go to the top view. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel, zoom back. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I let go of shift and the middle mouse button. Now I'm going to go to the tools tab. We can see we're in the top view here. Now we need to change the image from the reference image because the reference image does not have a top view. So we're going to click here. We're going to select here, which is the top view. So now that that's done, we're going to look at our source clone UV map. We're going to change this from back to top. We can see that these sides here, I think, look good. So we're going to dodge them. We're going to dodge the back, and we're going to paint where we can see that we can make things better. So I'm going to press F to shrink my brush size. I'm painting, trying to dodge those windows there. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom in. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, there's still some more work to do. I'm going to click image and then click save as image. Okay, I'm going to roll the middle mouse button to zoom back. Okay, I'm going to go to image and then I'm going to select save image. I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to take a look. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. We're going to click here, go to object mode. We're going to click on our tires. We're then going to click on the main UV maps for the, we're going to, under our UV maps, we want to have main selected. We then want to go to our navigation tab and then select right. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. We're now going to click here, then go to texture paint. We're now going to go to our tools panel. We're going to click here, make sure we're on the reference image that we've used for most of this tutorial. We're then going to see that we're in right view here. We want this source clone UV map to be the right view as well. We're now going to press F and then paint these tires. The reason that we are doing this is so that one UV map will go across the main mesh body as well as the tires here. So I'm going to click image, save image. Okay, so we're going to click here, go to object mode. We're going to click here, then click here, then go to texture paint mode. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, what we want to do now is use our clone brush to fix issues like this. So I'm going to take away this check mark from clone from image. Now what I'm going to do is zoom in. I'm going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to zoom in more. I'm going to press F and then decrease the size of my brush. I'm going to hold control and then left click. Now let go of control. Now right here where this 3D cursor is at, Blender's going to take this cursor and then wherever I click, it's going to pull the image right here, for the most part now is color. It's going to pull that and put that here. So as I left click, that's what's going on here. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is click image, save image. Okay, now we're going to roll our mouse wheel. We're going to hold shift as well as the middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to zoom in here, holding shift and middle mouse button to pan. I'm going to press F to shrink my brush. I'm going to hold control and then left click here. So now I can use, I'm just left clicking and just pressing and letting go, and it's allowing me to paint right here. So I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, so to fade in areas like this, what we can do now is we can change the string from .1.000. We can click here and then change this to .5 and then press enter. So now this is half the strength for our brush. So now I can blend this in better. Okay, so I'm going to click image, save image. Okay, I'm going to hold control, then click here. Now I'm purposely going over this line some. I'm going to hold control and click, and I re-hold control because I think you're better off not getting too far away from where you're cloning your color from. Hold shift and the mouse button to pan. I'm going to hold control. And hopefully you can see you could get some really nice results if you really put the time in. I'm going to hold control. Blend this in some. I'm just using that to, blend this in. Okay, I'm going to go to image and then click save image. Okay, I'm going to roll my mouse wheel to zoom back. I'm going to hold shift and the middle mouse button to pan. Okay, we're going to click here and go to object mode. I'm then going to click here, change this to solid. I'm going to click here. You can see here's our material here. We're now going to click here where this is our texture panel. This is our material panel right here. What we want to do here is click texture where this says none. We want to click here select image or movie, and then what we want to do here is click our main texture. So we'll click here. So there's the main texture there. We would then want to scroll down, see where it says mapping generated. We want to click here and change this to UV. And then now with that done, oops, when we click here and then go to material, we can see our car here. If we click on our tires, and we take, oops, not that. If we click here and we take off our subdivision surface modifier, we can see that we only have 554 triangles. If I turn this back on and take this to 1, we still have very, this is very low poly. We have, 1,210 triangles. So I can see the tires. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna click here, go back to texture paint for the tires. We'll zoom in. We'll go to our navigation tab. Let's click view global/local. We'll go to our tools and we'll hold control on the black part and we'll paint here. Zoom in here. That's interesting. It's holding control and it was making me, oh, that's right, yeah. If you hold control, it makes you go to left and right. I'm thinking I was holding control and then holding the mouse button. Anyway, I'm gonna hold control, then click there. And actually, we don't even need that. We can click texture paint. We can go here. And we should be able to just paint in this dark color here. For the tires. Take the strength up to 1. There we go. Just painting this in. Okay, so now we'll click navigation. We're in local mode. That's why you can't see the rest of the car. So we'll click here. This brings us back to global mode. So now you can see the rest of the car. Now we want to click image, save image. Okay, when I hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view, you look here. This is hollow. This is easy to deal with. We're going to click here, go to object mode. Because we're trying to make this very low poly, we click here, we hold shift. While holding shift, we press S. We choose cursor to selected. I held the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Hold shift, press A. Bring in a cube. You press S to scale on the Y axis, like that. S to scale on the Y axis. And I'll click here, go to edit mode. I'll go to phase select, I'll click here. Push that down. I'll press A to select the entire cube, press S to scale on the X axis. Okay, a little bit too much. Press S to scale on the Z axis. I'll click on materials, click new. Click the fuse. Click the fuse. Make that a darker material. Well, now we have a bottom. However, we don't, have a big increase in polygon count. So what I'm going to do now is left click here to drag to get rid of that. And here we have our low poly car. Edge select here, push that down, press A to deselect. I'll click here to go to object mode and press A to deselect. Okay, I'm going to hold the middle mouse button to rotate the view. Okay, so here we have our low poly car. As you work on it, if you really take the time, you can really blend in your colors and the clone brush. My objective here was I wanted to have a very low poly car without having the subdivision surface on the tires. This is a little bit more than 500 triangles. This isn't something that you would want to be the main character in something. However, if you're working on a city, you want to have cars in the background and a lot of cars. I definitely would say you're better to go this route. Even taking down those tires to where they don't have the subdivision surface on here, and then you can have from a distance something that looks like it has more detail than what it does. When I say have more detail than what it does, what I mean is detail in the actual mesh. Okay guys, that's it for the tutorial. For all of those of you out there who like the videos on this channel and reshare them, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And to those of you who are new to this channel, if you like the videos on this channel and you would like to see more, please subscribe, and thank you for viewing.